They say you can cross an ocean on almost anything, and technically that's true. People have crossed on boats that were too small, too old, too wet, too slow, and way too underprepared. But that's not the real question. The real question is this: if your budget is capped at $100,000, what sailboat actually gives you the best chance of getting across safely, comfortably, and without turning the whole project into a money pit? Because offshore, the purchase price is only the beginning. A cheap boat with bad chain plates, tired rigging, old tanks and a mystery bottom job isn't a bargain. It's a refit bill pretending to be a dream. So this list isn't about fantasy boats, it's not about marina status, and it's definitely not about what looks best in a brokerage photo. This is about 7 sailboats with real offshore credibility that can still make sense in the sub-$100,000 market. Not just to buy, to actually prepare. Because that's the trap. A lot of boats can be bought under $100,000. Far fewer can be bought, fixed, equipped and trusted offshore under that same number. And that's why classic fiberglass still dominates this category. The old school boats from the 70s and 80s, the era of thick laminates, conservative rigs, serious ballast, and hulls designed to survive real weather instead of maximizing marina volume. These boats aren't perfect. Some are slow, some are cramped, some have known structural weak points you absolutely have to inspect. But the best ones still offer something modern boats in this price range usually don't. Real offshore logic, heavy weather manners, and construction standards that were often absurdly robust by today's standards. Starting at number 7, the Albin Vega 27 looks too small to belong in this conversation, and that's exactly why it belongs here. Because this boat is one of the great exceptions in offshore sailing. A 27-footer with modest dimensions and shallow draft that somehow built a global reputation by doing the things smaller boats supposedly shouldn't do. Crossing oceans, again and again. The Vega has sailed to the Arctic, to the Antarctic, and around the world more times than many much larger boats ever will. That only happens when a design gets the fundamentals right. Per Brohel's design carries a ballast ratio around 40% and a displacement to length ratio of about 290. That gives the boat much more stiffness and offshore seriousness than most people expect from something this short. It uses a deck-stepped mast, a modified long keel, and a keel-mounted rudder. Simple, honest, easy to understand. And offshore, simplicity has real value. The Vega's other superpower is economics. A lot of these boats can still be bought for $15,000 to $25,000. That changes everything, because at that point, the smartest strategy isn't stretching for the biggest hull you can afford. It's buying a real little ocean boat and refitting it properly. New diesel, fresh wiring, modern safety gear, new standing rigging, wind vane or autopilot, updated communications. On a Vega, that kind of no-compromise refit is still financially possible inside the overall budget. You could spend $30,000 on the boat and refit, and still have $70,000 in reserve for provisioning, insurance, marina fees, and the unexpected. No other boat on this list gives you that kind of financial margin, and margin isn't luxury. Margin is the difference between a voyage that works and one that stalls halfway because the money ran out in the Canaries. The obvious trade-off is space. This is not a boat for people who want floating condo comfort. But that's also why the Vega works. It forces efficiency, and efficient boats are often safer boats. Number 6 is the Contessa 32, the boat that keeps humiliating bigger boats. Because on paper it can look too narrow, too small, too old school, and too cramped to carry the reputation it carries. Then the weather turns ugly, and suddenly the whole design starts making sense. The Contessa 32 earned its legend in the most convincing way possible, at sea. During the 1979 Fastnet disaster, while larger yachts were abandoned or capsized in survival conditions, the Contessa 32 Ascent was the only boat in its class to finish. That's not branding, that's offshore credibility under public pressure. And it matters, because the Fastnet race that year wasn't some minor blow, it was a catastrophe. Force 10 conditions, 15 lives lost, 24 boats abandoned, 5 sank. In that context, a 32-footer not only surviving, but finishing the race tells you everything you need to know about what David Sadler prioritized in this design. Narrow beam at around 9.5, high ballast ratio at about 47%. The result is a boat that's difficult to knock down, powerful upwind, and deeply trustworthy in heavy weather. This is not a boat built around interior volume. Headroom is only around 5'10". The interior is narrow, space is limited. But the trade makes sense. Older Contessa 32s often land somewhere between $35,000 and $65,000. That leaves enough room for the refit work that really matters. For a solo sailor or disciplined couple, the Contessa 32 is one of the most confidence-inspiring boats you can buy at this size and price. Number 5 is the Cape Dory 36. What happens when classic offshore design gets refined just enough for cruising without losing its core integrity? This is Carl Ahlberg thinking, adapted for real passage making. Long overhangs, full keel with attached rudder, heavy displacement, steady motion. Built from 1978 to 1990, the Cape Dory 36 is a modified version of the Ahlberg 37 racing design. Displacement to length ratio around 365. Comfort ratio around 36. Ballast ratio roughly 37.5%. Those are real blue water numbers. This is the kind of boat that settles into a seaway instead of fighting every wave with frantic motion. And that matters because crew fatigue isn't just a comfort issue. Fatigue causes mistakes. Mistakes offshore become damage, injury, or bad decisions. The usual criticism of the Cape Dory 36 is light air performance, and that's fair. But in steady offshore breeze, the whole design wakes up. It becomes what it was meant to be, a powerful, comfortable tracker. A boat that makes long passages feel manageable. The interior is practical. Pilot berths, storage, a sit-tub shower. This is an offshore layout where practical use and secure movement matter more than open-plan living. Prices often fall between $50,000 and $85,000. That means you can buy a real offshore boat with enough volume for long-distance use and still keep money available for the gear and repairs that matter. Number 4 is the Tiana 37, one of the cult classics of blue water cruising. Designed by Robert Perry and built by Tai Yang in Taiwan, the Tiana 37 is a big, small boat. Around 22,500 pounds of displacement. Displacement to length ratio around 407. Comfort ratio around 40. This is not a performance cruiser, it's a load-carrying passage home. The interior is another reason people fall in love with this boat. Tai Yang's woodwork was exceptional, teak joinery throughout, a feeling of solidity and permanence that most modern production boats can't match. But this is also one of the easiest boats on the list to buy badly, because the Tiana 37 has some very specific maintenance traps. The biggest is the original chain plate arrangement. The chain plates were encapsulated in fiberglass and plywood within the hull. Over time, water ingress can lead to hidden corrosion, and when chain plates fail, rigs come down. A lot of owners solve it by converting to external chain plates, usually at a cost in the $4,000 to $6,000 range. The decks are the other major issue. Many Tiana 37s use teak over fiberglass decks with thousands of screws. And thousands of fastener penetrations are exactly how older boats end up with wet cores, hidden rot, and huge bills. So the Tiana isn't a casual purchase, it's a condition purchase. Buy one with chain plates and deck issues already handled, and it becomes one of the best traditional offshore cruisers available in this range. Buy one with those problems unresolved, and your budget can disappear very fast. Number 3 is the Westsail 32, the icon. The boat everyone calls indestructible. The American poster child for heavy displacement offshore cruising. The Westsail 32 displaces around 19,500 pounds on a 27.5-foot waterline. That gives it an ultra-heavy displacement-to-length ratio of 419. Ballast is 7,000 pounds. Comfort ratio 42.85. Capsize screening formula 1.64. Those are serious numbers. And the construction is where the reputation really comes from. The hull uses 12 alternating layers of hand-laid woven roving and chopped strand mat, resulting in solid fiberglass more than an inch thick at the turn of the bilge. That's massive. The main weakness is the deck and cabin top, which used a half-inch plywood core that can rot if hardware hasn't been properly rebedded over the years. There's also the quality split in the market. A lot of Westsail 32s were sold as kits. That means interior and systems quality can vary dramatically. Factory-finished boats or professionally completed examples command more money. Poorly finished ones can require a major rebuild. But because the hull itself is so fundamentally robust, even project boats can still make sense for the right buyer. The Westsail is slow. No point pretending otherwise. But when people talk about a boat that can carry a world aboard and keep going, this is exactly the kind of design they mean. Number 2 is the Baba 30. What happens when traditional offshore design gets refined into something far more elegant than it has any right to be? If the Westsail is the brick, the Baba is the sculpture. Designed by Robert Perry and built by Ta Xing in Taiwan, the Baba 30 is widely considered one of the finest small offshore yachts ever built. Perry was trying to prove that a traditional double-ender didn't have to be slow. So instead of drawing a pure heavy-weather tank, he gave the boat an easily driven hull with a prismatic coefficient around 0.5 and matched it with a generous cutter rig. That combination matters because offshore speed isn't vanity, it's exposure control. The shorter the passage, the fewer opportunities for gear failure, weather trouble, and crew fatigue. The structure is also excellent. Solid fiberglass hull, 10 to 12 laminate layers around the keel, 4,000-pound iron ballast ingot encapsulated in the hull, and interior teak joinery that has become legendary. The Baba 30 does have two specific weak points. The original bilge-mounted mild steel fuel tanks can corrode. A lot of owners replace them with custom aluminium or stainless tanks. The second issue is chain plates, which can be vulnerable to crevice corrosion. But the good news is they're accessible from the interior, which makes inspection realistic. The Baba 30 also holds its value unusually well. Typical prices often run between $55,000 and $79,000. If you want a small offshore yacht with real pedigree, refined handling, beautiful construction, and enough seriousness for ocean work, the Baba 30 is one of the strongest answers in the whole category. And number 1 is the Pacific Seacraft 37. the smartest sailboat to cross an ocean under $100,000. And the reason it wins isn't because it has the most dramatic story or the most extreme construction. It wins because it gets the most things right at the same time. Designed by Bill Krelock and later inducted into the American Sailboat Hall of Fame, the Pacific Seacraft 37 is often described as one of the most balanced offshore sailboats ever made. And that word balanced is the key, because balance in a sailboat isn't just about how it sits in the water, it's about how every design decision supports every other one. Hull shape supports motion comfort. Motion comfort supports crew endurance. Crew endurance supports safe watches. Safe watches support good decision-making. Good decision-making supports survival. It's a chain, and the Pacific Seacraft 37 is one of the few boats where every link in that chain was considered from the beginning. It uses a cutaway full keel and a skeg-hung rudder. That gives it directional stability, forgiving motion, and real sea kindliness without making it feel hopelessly slow or clumsy. The construction is also excellent. Solid, hand-laid fiberglass hull, encapsulated lead ballast, bronze through hulls, quality hardware throughout. Pacific Seacraft had a reputation for building boats above the standard of the era, and the 37 is a prime example. The most common maintenance concerns are standing rigging, chain plates, engine hours, and the teak decks if present. These aren't design flaws, they're age-related realities. The difference is that on the Pacific Seacraft, the underlying structure is so sound that once you address these items, you're left with a boat that can genuinely be trusted for decades more. The downside is price. The Pacific Seacraft 37 is so sought after that it frequently flirts with the $100,000 line. But examples from the 80s or boats with higher hours and less cosmetic perfection can still show up in the $65,000 to $95,000 range. And if you find the right one at the right number, you're getting one of the best ocean-crossing sailboats ever built. Now here's the bigger truth behind this whole list. The best sub-$100,000 ocean boat is usually not the biggest boat. It's the boat with the best bones and the fewest expensive lies. A structurally honest $50,000 boat with room left for refit is often far better than a $90,000 boat that still needs everything. That's why boats like the Cape Dory 36 and Pacific Seacraft 37 are so compelling. They leave margin, and margin offshore is safety. The West Sail 32 and Tiana 37 give you old-school mass and comfort ratios that are hard to ignore. The Baba 30 and Contessa 32 prove that smaller boats can still be elite offshore machines. And the Vega offers the lowest cost legitimate entry point into offshore sailing that exists. But once you stop shopping emotionally and start shopping technically, the pattern gets very clear. You don't just buy a hull, you buy standing rigging, you buy tank condition, you buy chain plates, you buy deck core integrity, you buy steering reliability, you buy self-steering compatibility, you buy the truth hidden under the brochure photos. That's what separates a blue water bargain from a blue water mistake. And in this market, the winners are usually the boats that combine real offshore pedigree with enough leftover budget to solve the known issues properly. That's the whole game, not what looks toughest, what still makes sense after the survey, after the yard quote, and after the first serious refit spreadsheet. Because that's when the fantasy ends and the real ocean boat reveals itself. If you've owned any of these boats, or crossed on something else in this price range, say so in the comments. That's where the useful patterns show up. And if you want more breakdowns like this, straight talk about what actually works offshore, subscribe. No hype, just what holds up when it matters.